I wanted to explore what some different fibers would look like when I added the clear gesso and some acrylics. What I've got is the clear gesso, and I've diluted it down by about 75%, as I usually do. It would be interesting to look two things at areas that had the gesso so that the paint would move across the surface in a different way from when it was dry. I also wanted to try these different fibers. This is hemp and it's a very loose weave. It's not going to tear or rip. It's pretty strong fibers. So I'm going to have to cut it if I want those smaller pieces. I treated myself to a new brush over the holidays. The reason I like this one is I think it gives me better control getting into the surface in a better way. I'm starting with the quinacridone gold, and I've diluted it again. And I think what I'll do is work it across in a diagonal way, so I'm getting both the dry and the wet areas. I picked this color partly because it's absolutely gorgeous, but also to mix with my next color, which is the Payne's Gray, and I'll be able to get some pretty nice green. Another thing that I really enjoy doing is using these pipettes so I can spread finer lines. And if I wanted to, I could then work into them with that brush. Now I have the Payne's Gray, and I'm going to just move it across the surface. And you can see how this kind of fiber really soaks it up. And I love how it mixes in with the gold, and I'm getting really interesting greens in there, mixtures of green with the pipette. Again, have better control, which gives me some interesting lines, and sometimes they spread. Although with this fiber, they're going to spread and wick around quite a bit anyway, because it's very absorbent and partly because it's a very open weave there. I've got a fusible woven interfacing and a lovely bit of stuff on here. I'm going to take that sort of ghost print and pick that up, then put it somewhere to dry. Then I could come back picking up other colors depending on what is left on the plastic. It's a way of also cleaning up the plastic, and I can actually wipe it here. But remember, with the fusible, you don't want to iron it until you're absolutely ready. Now in this case, I've got something that I think is more a needlepoint canvas, a petty point. Partly I think it's that because of the double threads in there. So I'm just putting that gesso on again. And I'm working on a project where I want some more greens. So I've got a dirty brush with the Payne's Gray in it, but I'm going to use some green acrylic ink because I don't have any of the fluid acrylic in green. And this is an olive, so I'm going to move it up into the dry area. And the nice part about this, because it's so fluid, I can just keep moving it across the surface and keep blending it. Now I know it's going to dry quite a bit lighter. I'm going to go in with a bit more of that dilute Payne's Gray there, and then go back to that quinacridone, add some more of the green, and brush it across the surface. So I'm getting some different, more yellowy greens in there, and more of the ink. You can see there's still that line remaining on the surface. What I love about working like this is building up the layers of color, seeing how they blend, as a canvas, I could actually work into this as my background and then think about layering it with stitch or more fabrics, maybe some translucent fabrics, other colors, other marks. So it really is that background, establishing the background that I can use later on. So I'm building up an inventory, as it were. That linen that I used was a lot finer weave. I've got masses of stuff here to sop up with that fusible interfacing, but it's looking actually nice to adapt for something else. There we go. This last piece is a burlap kind of fiber. It's incredibly absorbent, so I'm able to get this dilute gesso into, it's just soaking it up like crazy. I've used all of that. Let's look again at how this absorbs into the surface. I have plastic underneath, so what will happen is any of the liquid, the acrylics, will also travel underneath the fiber and move into different areas. So I've got these diagonal lines, and maybe I'll right out to the edge. I don't want to waste any of this fiber. Then we'll go in with that Payne's Gray. I'm repeating the colors because I want to build up the inventory, work into it. Now, it's not moving with the brush nearly as much as the others. Get a bit of water on my brush and try and coax it a little further. Rather than water on my brush, I thought maybe I would use a spray bottle, because that will often work to encourage things. Actually, what it does do is it pushes the color down underneath so that the surface fibers are lighter colors, which is an interesting way of getting different values in here. But I'm going to go back to the water and the brush because it seems to be a little quicker. Well, that covers things, but I would like a little bit more green in there. So I'm going to push them across a bit more. We'll let that dry and we'll have a look and see what we think. Here's another way of coloring some fabric if you want to perhaps cut it up for some applique. And I've got my dilute gesso. Even though it looks very milky, it will dry clear. And this is fabric that I've just had around. I'm just moving the gesso into the fabric, and that'll give it lots of body. And then I can go in and color the surface. For this one, I want some rocks and landscape stuff. And I know that I've got the blue here, but I'm adding some burnt sienna mixed with some quinacridone gold. This is a bit light for my liking, so I'm going to pull in some other colors. I like the roughness. I like the way that colors are merging. Rocks are never just one solid color. We're introducing some other colors. I've got some antelope brown in here. And you know what? I'm just going to pour a bit. Oh, maybe not. I think I'm just about the end of the bottle here. Let's just, there. I mentioned earlier that this is a brush that I got during the holidays, and I really like the control that I have over it. There's some more, but it's still a bit on the light side for my liking. So I've got a velvet brown, and this is a textile paint. And so you can see I'm mixing up all kinds of different paints and colors. Even though I'm working in fabric, I'm not too concerned about having it washable. Textile paint is great if you're doing clothing or something that's going to be washed, but I don't see it's needed on something that won't be used as clothing or put in the wash. That's giving some darker areas, and maybe the brush strokes will show up a little bit, but That's all right, because as I say, it's going to be cut up. Now I can add a different color to my fusible interfacing. Another option is to work with fabrics that you've already put surface treatment on. In this case, it's a piece of PFD cotton, and it has had potato starch resist. It's a bit pale for what I want to work on, so I'm going to wet it and then add more color, having it scrunched up on the surface. I've wet this, and the reason I like it is I thought of rocks that I could put onto my work, and it's already got that crackly effect. So I've got some dilute brown. I think I'm going to darken this up a bit. Let's try that again. That's better. So I'm thinking that I can get lots of interesting color changes across the surface by just having it random and having the scrunching in it. The colors will disperse in different areas, reasonably light values and some darker values. But I'm also thinking of the gray in here, and I'd like to keep some of it or change it over. I've got some fluid acrylic carbon black, and I'm going to sprinkle it just in a few areas, and then I will brush it into the surface a bit, just so it isn't quite so blobby. Yeah, I think that might be some good rocks. The beauty is if you don't think it's good, you just go back and do something else. For this next one, I have a piece of silk sateen that I had dyed 40 years ago. It was for a project. It didn't get used. It hung around in the studio. And I love the little bit of a shimmer to it. I want to use this for some rocks. So I'm going to just dab on. It has blue and gray in there anyway. And now because it's several layers, it may not go all the way through. So I'm going to flip it over. But I think just a wee bit more. Rocks are not just black and gray, so I'm going to dabble a little bit of some brown in it. And I'm going to leave it like that. That previous piece was wet, so now I'm going into dry fabric, and I will get a stronger intensity to the color. I'm just dabbing it on. I'll turn it over, dab it a bit more, maybe another one, then a bit of the brown. I'll show you what I'm going to do next. Just end up pouring a bit. Now I will scrunch it all up. We've got color moving across. This will be really good for what I want. It looks dark, but once it's dry, it will lighten up considerably, probably by about 30%.